Welcome back to Terms of Service. I'm Claire Duffy. So today we're going to do something a little different. We have a whole grab bag of tech questions about how to stay safe and savvy in our ever-changing online world. And we're going to try to answer all of them rapid fire style. To help me get the job done, I've invited Rachel Toback back to the show. You may remember her from our episode about setting and managing your passwords. Rachel is an ethical hacker and the CEO of Social Proof Security, where she helps people and companies to keep their data safe. Hi, Rachel. I'm so glad to have you back.
Thanks so much for having me back.
So you just got back from DEF CON, the annual hacking convention in Las Vegas. Before we get into it, I wanted to ask you how that was.
Oh, it was so much fun. We did some pretty cutting edge stuff this year. So we had agentic attacks. That's AI agents running LLMs on the background with voice clones doing calls. So in the booth, attacking with a shot clock in the background, counting down from 20 minutes to get as many flags as possible. It was wild this year.
Wow. Yeah, I'm sure like so many scary things that we will need to talk about.
We have so
in
many
future
scary
episodes.
So many scary things to talk about.
So as a hacker, I imagine you are used to moving fast. It sounds like that's the case. So I thought that you would be perfect for this sort of grab bag episode. Are you ready to answer some quick tech questions?
I'm ready to move fast and break things. Let's do it.
Okay, so the first question is about Wi-Fi. I think a lot of us have been warned that public Wi-Fi at the airport or at Starbucks can be dangerous and make you susceptible to hackers. Is that true?
So we used to hear not to use public Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi at a cafe or a hotel to do things like banking or log into your email. That was a very early 2000s recommendation. Now with HTTPS, which is essentially encryption on most websites, that HTTPS instead of an HTTP at the beginning of the URL, it's a little bit less of a risk because usually we have encryption on every website. Now, one notable risk that still exists is with that kind of free Wi-Fi experience that requires you to log in to use it. So you may have been at a Starbucks before and you see, oh, free Starbucks Wi-Fi. How exciting. You go to click it and it says, oh, you have to log in, put your username and password here. Well, there are devices, one of which is called a Wi-Fi pineapple that people love to use at DEF CON, that can impersonate a wireless network like, say, Starbucks or Hilton, for example. And it replicates the login pages. So this is the real specific risk we're talking about. When you have to log in or provide a username and password to use the Wi-Fi, that's when the risk truly begins with these Wi-Fi pineapples. So they try to say, oh, you got to log in, and they try to steal access to things like your Google password, your Microsoft password. They're hoping that you reuse passwords across accounts. And in fact, this actually just happened to a friend of mine within the last couple of months. So we know it's being used all over the world.
Wow. So it's not actually the Starbucks Wi-Fi network. It's somebody who's come in and made a fake Wi-Fi network that looks like, or that's named Starbucks Wi-Fi.
That's exactly right.
Got it. And how could a hacker get into your personal accounts if you were to log in through that Wi-Fi pineapple?
Yeah, they would steal access to your username and password, and they would probably log in as you, triggering that MFA request, that second step when you log in, so that you think, oh, well, I just logged in, it has to be legitimate. When in reality, they are logging in as you to steal access to your two-factor code so they can log in using your username and password and your MFA.
Got it. So what is then your recommendation around public Wi-Fi? It's okay to use, but don't use it if you have to log in?
That's kind of right. I know it sounds really wild, but those little pop-ups that you see that say, okay, log in to use this Wi-Fi at, say, Starbucks, that's where it gets risky. So it's hard for people to understand exactly where the risk lies. Is it actually using the Wi-Fi if there is no login page? Can I log into my regular Gmail account? Is it they're stealing access to my username and password when I log in on that little Starbucks pop-up? It is kind of about that little pop-up.
Yeah. Okay, so on a somewhat related note, my next question is about VPNs. We have gotten into this a little bit on Terms of Service before, but will you just give us kind of the Cliff's Notes definition of what a VPN is?
Yeah. So In general, VPNs are used to obfuscate your location and who you are. So, in layman's terms, they try to add privacy to you online. And VPNs aren't necessary for most everyday users in their personal life. So, most sites, like I mentioned, that you go to are encrypted. They have that HTTPS rather than that HTTP within the URL. And that means that your internet service provider, they can see the sites that you look at, but they can't see the content that you enter and they can't see what you're doing on that page. Now, when you use a VPN, the VPN now can see which sites you access.
Oh.
And many of them claim that they don't log the sites you access, but you're really just shifting the privacy risk from your internet service provider to the VPN. So earlier in 2025, I would say, and you've probably even seen me say this online, VPNs are not for everybody. They're not for every use case. However, that game has changed a little bit as of August 2025. Now that the UK and some US states are censoring which sites users can access and requiring ID and selfie to access things like a Wikipedia page, games, social media, we're seeing a massive spike in VPN usage to get around the censorship and view restricted content without having to provide access to a risky action like your ID and your selfie, which actually can be quite risky, right?
Yeah.
Anytime you collect that data, you have to protect it and you have to believe that that organization is protecting it. And many of them are not.
Right. Yeah. And what you're talking about there is these sort of like laws, regulations, policies that have been instituted with the goal of protecting kids online, at least in theory. But a lot of times that means even adults are going to have to provide their ID or their credit card. We saw this with YouTube just recently. It's going to start guessing users' ages with AI. And if it wrongly thinks you're a teen, you're going to have to start providing that personal data. So that's a really interesting point about how more and more people might start using VPNs. How have you traditionally thought about who or what situations a VPN is good for?
Yeah, a VPN is good for somebody who believes that their VPN can protect them better than their internet service provider. And they're more comfortable sharing the sites that they go to with their VPN provider than their ISP. Like I mentioned, you're just shifting the risk from the ISP to the VPN. So if you trust your VPN more, then I would say go ahead and go for that. And if you really feel like you need to obfuscate who you are on the internet, you prefer to be more private, it doesn't hurt to use a VPN if you trust that VPN.
Something I think people might be more familiar with is being asked to use a VPN on a work computer when they're doing tasks online for work. Why is that you might want to use one for work, but maybe not necessarily need it for your personal use?
Right. So people at work are often required to use a VPN because the information that they're working with is extremely sensitive, and they want to make sure that the person who's using the information is coming from the location that they claim to be from. And so the VPN is actually almost like authenticating them within their network, within their work environment. Now, that isn't something that we really have to think about as much in our personal life, but some people still want to be extra private online and they trust their VPN more than their ISP, and so they choose to use one.
Do you use one in your personal life?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
If you want to find especially if there are folks who are listening who are worried about having to provide their ID to access an online system as we increasingly see these policies roll out, how do you find a trustworthy VPN?
Yeah, you just want to find one that has a lot of really positive reviews that you trust on the App Store. Sometimes people are like, oh, I want to use a free VPN. So they try and search up free VPNs that have like 2 to 3 positive reviews. I wouldn't go in that direction because, again, you shift your risk from your internet service provider to the VPN. So your VPN should be a lot more trustworthy if you're going to use it.
So you touched on this. I wanted to ask you about uploading your ID online. Some people have probably heard this news that went semi-viral online recently about this app called T that lets women share information about the men they've dated. The app was hacked, and there were a lot of women who had uploaded their IDs to prove that they were women in order to get onto this platform. Yeah. Those are now accessible to maybe anyone on the internet who goes looking for them.
Unfortunately.
How should people be thinking about providing their IDs to platforms that are increasingly asking for them, if it's a site that they want to use or they feel like they need to use, how do you sort of think about evaluating that risk? Should you never do it?
Well, I try not to talk in absolutes because it's just not reasonable for most people, right? If the way that the world is moving is that they're requiring IDs, you're probably at some point going to be required to upload an ID to, say, use a government site or something that you have to do that's mandatory for your life, like for your job that you're just starting. I would say anytime that you cannot upload an ID in a selfie, I would take that route. If there is an option not to, try to do that. It's kind of like when you're going through the airport and they require you to use Face ID and you say, is there any other way that I could do this? Maybe you can give me a pat down somewhere.
Yeah.
It's going to be a little bit more painful for a while we work out the regulation. And we see whether or not people are willing to accept this. I think it's going to be a pretty privacy violating experience for a little while. And we're going to see many breaches that stem from this regulation that release IDs to the wild. And the problem with that is when your ID is leaked, it leaks access to your address, your weight in some cases, your picture, information about your organ donor registry. I mean, these are pieces of information that you can't just switch like you can a password. So when you've been involved in a breach and your password is leaked, you go and change your password. If you're uploading your ID to the T app and that gets breached, well, now people can find where you live and you can't just move like you can change your password. It's pretty damaging.
And a lot of these systems, they'll give you the option of doing like this live selfie or an ID or maybe a credit card. Is a selfie better than an ID if you have the choice or not necessarily?
I would say that a selfie is less inherently risky. So if you can do that, probably go for it. However, I will say most of these systems are thwarted very easily, like showing a picture of a character on television or in a game. We've even seen like slightly animated games being used to thwart this. So, if you can game the system, why not? As long as it's not illegal, I'd say go for it.
Okay, next question. I'm going to set the scene for you. You click on a website, this box pops up. I know we've all had this experience, and it asks you if you would like to agree or reject the cookies. If you say no, a whole other window might pop up with lots of reading. It's often very confusing. Yep. First off, what is a cookie?
Yeah. So cookies are little tracking devices, little data collection tools. Somebody thought to name them cookies to make them a little less scary, but they're not. This is
brilliant
cute.
Tech marketing.
Yeah, it's brilliant marketing. The cookies are not cute at all. They're used to build profiles for users for things like targeted ads, marketing, data about purchases, tools that you use. And yeah, they do things like make it a little more convenient on the internet. They help you log in fast to sites. They help you remember information about when you last used the site. Helps you not like reinvent the wheel when you go to the pizza place website and make another purchase. They kind of already know who you are, right? But there's always a trade-off between convenience and privacy or security. We talk about that all the time. Some websites have more privacy violating cookies than others. For instance, they might try to sell your browsing habits, your profiles to more groups. And we don't want to approve the use of cookies on sites that we don't want to be tracked because essentially they're tracking devices. So these are things like medical sites, anywhere your private health information, PHI, is listed, your PII, like your address, phone number, date of birth, your social security number, anywhere that you're inputting stuff like that, I probably would not click allow on cookies because cookies can also be stolen and used to log in as you, and there are risks from a data breach perspective as well.
That's really interesting, especially about the sort of like address, birth date piece, because I feel like a lot of these like a lot of the sites where I see cookie requests pop up are online shopping sites where, naturally you're going to be entering your address. Maybe they ask for your birthday because you can be part of a, get rewards or points or something.
Right.
What do you do in this situation? Do you always say no and then click through the annoying window and go through the process?
Yeah. So you kind of have to think about it like risk mitigation. You want to accept cookies as infrequently as possible. Sometimes you have to use cookies because a site straight up won't let you in or won't work without them. One kind of easy thing that you can do is use something called the Brave browser, which auto rejects cookies. Now, like I mentioned, sometimes that means that the site doesn't load super well, and you can always revert back to using cookies if you so choose, but it's a really good place to start, and it makes it so that you don't have to make as many decisions. Brave kind of works on your behalf to protect you.
Interesting. So instead of using Google Chrome or Safari or something, you would use the Brave browser instead.
Yeah, exactly.
And in some cases, I mean, sort of to your point, there are websites who say some of these cookies are necessary, some of them are optional.
Right.
Talk me through that. Should we be worried about the necessary cookies?
Yeah, the hard thing is, how do they define necessary? How do they define optional? And some companies do it differently than others. Some of them are a lot riskier than others, and it's hard to tell at first glance what they are actually meaning by optional and what they mean and who they're providing that information to. So I would, in general, reject as many cookies as you possibly can.
It sounds like a good sort of general rule of thumb, although maybe not an absolute, is like be very wary of pop-ups in general.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's kind of funny because it's been like that since I started using the internet.
Yeah.
You know, like I've had to be wary of pop-ups since I was using Windows 98.
I love it. Okay, moving along, I have a question about scam texts, which seem to be getting more and more common. You know, these random numbers that text you offering a job or saying that you have a fine to pay because you crossed state lines, something weird like that. Or sometimes they just say hello or they send you a selfie. How are they getting our phone numbers in the first place?
Usually they are getting phone numbers from data brokerage sites. So if you go to Google right now and you type in your name and maybe where you work, that is totally accessible on LinkedIn, and the words email address or phone number, for most Americans, we can find that information within a few seconds in a Google search. These data brokerage sites like Contact Out, Rocket Reach, Been Verified, these sites sell access to our personal details for use with marketing or for hackers to try to trick us. So it really stinks that this is kind of how the world works right now. AI has kind of made it really easy to search up people, find information. I mean, at this point, at this day and age, you can even take a picture of somebody and, reverse search their face to find access to who they are, their email address, their phone number. And this is just kind of the breakdown of the way that the internet functions and the way that we expect privacy to exist in the world.
Is there anything that we can do to ward off these scam texts?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain apps that you can try to use that limit the amount of text messages and phone calls that you receive. I know that Apple is actually about to release new filters that they use within their text messages and their iMessage that will throw these into kind of like a spam folder. And I'm curious to see how this actually works in real life. I know Google has worked on a similar product to send a lot of these phone calls, alert them as spam phone calls. So hopefully technology increases to protect us, just like the attackers are using technology on the offense. Hopefully we can use it more on the defense too.
I have to tell you, Becca, our producer, for anyone who's listening, just sent me a message. She literally just got a scam text message.
Oh, no.
As we're talking about this, authorize the payment of $999 for the recent order of your Apple iPhone.
Yep.
So there you go.
Classic.
A question I have is should people ever respond to these texts? I know sometimes people think it's funny or entertaining to engage scammers and try to trick the scammers back.
Yeah. We call that behavior scam baiting. And if you are a professional scam baiter, go for it. But if you're not, I would say probably don't. And the reason why is because these scammers, they're on a hairpin trigger. These people are not kind people. And if you get on their radar as obnoxious or mean, they might target you even further. And I don't think that the average person wants to deal with that.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Well, and I've heard, tell me if this is wrong, but if you get one of these scam calls and you answer it, sometimes they just want to confirm that your number is a real number that a human is going to answer. Is that true?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Sometimes they just want to see, is this real? Does this caller, or does this receiver rather, pick up so that I know to add it to my list for future attacks?
So to wrap up, you spend every day thinking about hacking and data security.
Yeah.
What's the very first thing that you tell people about avoiding getting caught up in a data breach?
Yeah. So the craziest thing is you actually cannot prevent being involved in a data breach. It's really scary to actually understand that you don't have control over whether or not the companies that you trust with your data end up having a breach. The only thing you have control over is whether or not you reuse your password, whether or not you use multi-factor authentication, and whether or not you verify that people are who they say they are before taking action. So really the only control we have is making sure that we use long, random, unique passwords on every single account, generated and stored with a password manager, or use a passkey like your face with your Face ID when you log in, making sure you turn on multi-factor authentication so that if you are involved in a data breach, no fault of your own, the attacker can't just steal that password and just log in as you without any additional steps, and verify that people are who they say they are, right? If your phone number shows up in a data breach, you can't control that. But what you can control is when you receive that text message from the IRS, you say, wait a minute, is this really the IRS? Let me contact them to see if I actually need to pay this fine before taking action.
Yeah, such an important point. Well, Rachel, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for doing this again.
Thanks for having me on, Claire.